Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar on hiring in the spirit of service and tribal tradition. My name is Brandon Battle, Project Assistant with the ICP's Leading by Legacy and Tribal Community Policing programs. Today's webinar is provided by the ICP's Tribal Community Policing program and is made possible through the support of the COPS Community-Oriented Policing Services Office of the U.S. Department of Justice. Before we begin, there are a few key things about the GoToWebinar service. You have the option to log in and listen to the audio portion of the webinar through your speakers and microphone or via telephone. You will see these options on your control panel once you've logged in. If you are having any difficulty using GoToWebinar, you can contact IACP staff through the question box located in the bottom right. The control panel will automatically minimize itself. To enlarge it, click on the Side tab. At the end of the presentation, we will be taking live questions from the audience. You can ask a question by clicking on the hand icon in the control panel on the right. We will then call on you and unmute you so that you can directly ask the panelists a question. You may also submit a question by typing your question into the question box located at the bottom of the control panel. Once you have submitted your question, we will then read it to the panelists. Our presenters today are Darren Cruzon, Director of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Office of Justice Services, Captain Andrew Merrill with the Village Public Safety Officer Program of the Alaska State Troopers, Chief David Rogers from the Nez Perce Tribal Police Department, and Matt Lazikowski from the COPS Office with the U.S. Department of Justice. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Darren Cruzon.
Well, thank you, Brandon, very much, and it's an honor to be here. Jennifer, thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm very pleased to be presenting with this distinguished group about this important issue. It's one of the issues that, for me as the Director of the Office of Justice Services, I'm asked about quite a bit as I travel around. Why aren't you more staffed? Why don't you have officers? You have positions. Why aren't they filled? Those kind of things. And I think it's a struggle that we in Indian country probably all share, regardless of the agencies you work with, whether it be our tribal partners or our Bureau of Indian Affairs folks. And I think there's a number of reasons why that is, or at least a number of reasons that I like to point to. So, I can talk about that a little bit, and then I think I'd like to talk about one promising practice. I don't want to call it best practice yet because we're not far enough into it to say that it's going to work completely, but it's so far showing a lot of success. But so for us, and I know we've got Captain Merrill on here, so he can speak to remoteness better than any of us here, but that would be one of the issues, or one of the reasons that I think, for speaking for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, that we have some difficulty getting folks hired is because of the remoteness of some of these locations. I think ideally what we like to do as best we can is to find people from from the reservation and offer them jobs and try to recruit from the surrounding area, simply because housing is already there. There's already some established relationship with the community and understanding of the tradition, and so I think that is a direction we'd like to go, but that's not always the case. We're not always able to do that, and so when we do recruit outside of the local area, it's not unusual for us to get many names on a cert list, and so as you begin to go through those and try to select the best one may be in a state 4 states away, and they think that while we've got a job with the federal government doing real law enforcement work, seems exciting. It seems like an adventure that I would want to take on, and so they apply for the job. They go through the interview. They look good on paper, and gosh, when they get there, they realize, wow, this is a long way from home. I don't know anybody here. I'm not familiar with the traditions. Things as simple as, wow, I didn't know Walmart was 2 hours away, one direction, and so they get there and they like it, but they've also got a sort of competing issue with family where it maybe is not the most conducive, and so it can be very difficult to recruit and hire and get them there and then the next step is retaining. And so that's another issue that we struggle with a lot. And so there's the logistics piece of it, and then there's the actual process of it. In the federal government, the practice has been the Office of Justice Services has a vacancy. We announce it on USA Jobs. USA Jobs runs it. It takes us a couple of weeks to get the paperwork done, and it's up on the internet on the USA Job webpage for 30 days, and then it's 2 weeks to get a cert list back, and then it takes us another 2 to 3 weeks to get the cert list narrowed down, and then you've got a couple of weeks to do interviews. So now from the time we advertise, from the time we have the need to the time we actually get to make a selection, you could be looking at 3 or 4 months if things are going really well. Then you have the you make the selection, then you have the added time that it takes to get the background back from OPM, which can be months and months and months, and then you've got to try to time it just right to have a start date end up on a training date so from the time the issue is presented to us that, hey, we've got a position, we need to fill it, to the time we get it filled, you could seriously be looking at a year plus. And that's just unacceptable, and we thought, gosh, there's got to be a better way to do this. So we began talking to our human resources folks here in DC, and said, is there a better way to do this? And fortunately, the answer was yes. And it's not called, well, we call it, and within OJS we call it direct hire, but I think the technical term is accepted service. And I'm not an HR expert, so I can't explain why that is or what it means, but for simplicity's sake, now what we're able to do within the BI, so I wanted to tell you about the problems, now I want to tell you about an opportunity that we see as a real promising practice. An individual walks into a BI chief of police or into my office or anybody within the BI and says, hey, I'm interested in becoming a BI correction officer or police officer or telecommunication officer. The first thing that we ask is, do you have Indian preference? Because that's one of the requirements that we have, or one of the first requirements that we have with our Indian preference process. Are you Native American? So if the answer is yes, then we're now able to say, okay, here's what I need. I need your Form 4432, which is your certificate of Indian blood. We need your professional resume. We need, if you were in the military, if it's not required, but if you were, we need your 214, DD 214, and if you have a degree, we need your college transcripts. The minute that gets handed to me or anyone in our organization, there's a quick preliminary background done that we're looking for any issues that would immediately disqualify you, felonies, domestic violence convictions, these kind of things. If we don't see that, we give it to our human resources office. Our human resource office does a quick scan, and literally within that week, literally within a week, we can make a tentative offer to an employee. So what used to be a 3 or 4 month process has been whittled down to about 3 or 4 days. The background requirement is still there, and the training requirement is still there, but we have come up with a process when within the BIA at this point, and hopefully with our tribal partners real soon, we'll be able to get the adjudicated background process started at the same time that they begin their academy training, so those would run consecutively with each other. And we think we've taken and we've seen it to be the case, what could be a year plus process into 4 months. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but I've got just a quick anecdotal story about how this happened. One of the things we've asked all of the employees within OJS is, listen, it's more important to you folks who are out working the streets to make sure that these positions are filled than it is to me as the director, because you're the ones that are depending on these folks to fill these positions. And so we've made a call to all of our organization for them to be recruiters themselves, and so they need to be looking for those folks who are interested in a career in the BIA and then begin that process with them. And so to put my money where my mouth is, I was, this has been about 5 months ago now, I was looking for a car for my daughter, and it was about 11:30 at night in the town that I live in here in Virginia. And I was just looking at the price of the car, and about 2 minutes after I get out of my car, a spotlight hits me, and there's a county sheriff standing there asking me what I'm doing. So I showed him my credentials. I said, hey, I'm a police officer. And he goes, hey, who are you with? I said, it's an agency you've probably never heard of before. And I said, it's the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And he goes, oh my gosh, the BIA, I know all about your organization. I've applied for every job that you've had on USA Jobs for the last 2 years, and I can't make the cert list. And so we began to talk. This young man is a 10-point veteran, is working on his master's degree, has experience as a police officer in the federal system, and has a number of years of experience in the state and local system. And I said, you're exactly the kind of guy we're looking for. And he said, well, my issue is I'm non-Indian. I said, well, okay, well that certainly is an issue for our organization, but it's not one that we can't overcome. And I said, would you mind sending me your resume, your transcripts, and your DD 214, your military? He didn't have Indian preference, so there was no need for him to send that to me. So the very next day on my email pops all of this information. I look at it, it looks great. I forward it to our HR. They said, wow, this guy looks great, and because of his veterans preference, Indian preference still trumps that, but veterans preference trumps everything else. And so we were able, and he told me, ironically, I said, well, where are you interested in going? And he said, well, I know a lot about the organization. I know you have two particularly difficult locations to fill, one in Wyoming and one in South Dakota. So I'm interested in either one of those, which worked out really good for us. And I said, okay, well, I can make you no promises other than that I will do what I can to work with HR to see if this is an opportunity for you. Like I said, HR looked at it and said, this guy's phenomenal. He is exactly the kind of folks that, that a professional police department looks for, and so let's go for it. So they made a tentative offer. This was 5 months ago. He started Monday in South Dakota with the BIA. So so my whole point is, I think everybody on this call who has anything to do with hiring public safety professionals in any country can struggle with some of the same things I talked about. Housing, pay is an issue, logistics, the time it takes to get people hired. But I will tell you, if you're willing to look outside of the norm and just say, okay, this is the way we do it, but why do we do it that way, and are there other ways to do it? Most definitely there are other options out there, and not only are we trying it, we have many good examples all over our organization at every level of our direct hiring process working for us. And so like I said, it's a promising practice. I don't want to call it a best practice yet because we've not been doing it long enough, but we're certainly excited about it. And again, I thank you for letting me be here, and I'll turn my time over and be happy to answer questions if there are any.
Thanks so much. I'll turn it over to Captain Merrill.
Well, first, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate the relationships that we're building from Alaska with our partners around the lower 48, as we refer to it. Recruitment and hiring has been a struggle for the program. We have an extremely high turnover rate in the Vpso program. What I'll do, though, is I'll go over, for those that aren't aware of how the program functions, give you a little bit of an overview of how we work and kind of the unique structure that we have. VPSOs aren't direct employees of the Alaska State Troopers Department of Public Safety, so it makes the hiring process a little more difficult. So I'll run through some slides here, and we'll have some questions at the end if you have any, and we can kind of talk about it as we go through. So I'm the commander of the program statewide, and I work with our 10 partners that run the program. So a little bit of perspective when we talk about Alaska and size. that's an actual two-size picture of the state of Alaska superimposed upon the lower 48 down south. And so we are huge and vast. If you look at distances, a couple of those that pop up there, I mean, if you figure Ketchikan, which is the lower right-hand side of Alaska, up to Barrow, which is the top point, it's 1,300 miles, which is more than the distance from, you know, Miami up to D.C. So the distances that we cover are vast, and it makes it even more difficult when we start talking about trying to hire people to work out in remote Alaska. So the Vpso program was established in 1979 as a way to provide services to our villages in remote Alaska that were not receiving adequate public safety. The way it typically works is in Alaska, the native name, whether it's Yupik or Tlingit or Athabaskan, for trooper, state trooper, every language, the word they use first means he who comes and takes away, because that's the way that the troopers have enforced laws in Alaska. And so in an effort to prevent that and to provide on the ground, this project was developed to hire in-village residents that can actually provide that basic level of public safety service. And so that's when it was started, as back in 1979. It became fully funded and working in 1980. The highest we've ever been to funded positions was 121. We've never been able to fill all 121 positions that we had. That was 2 years ago. The maximum we've ever reached was 101. Part of that was that they were adding 15 positions a year, and I don't know any department that can keep up with adding 15 employees a year with training and the recruitment process. Currently this year, with our Alaska suffering that financial crisis that we're dealing with oil prices, we're down to 78 funded positions with 65 currently filled across the state. So the idea behind the Village Public Safety Officer program was to design a program that could provide more than just law enforcement. They're the boots on the ground providing a full service of public safety. So they're responsible in their villages for providing search and rescue, firefighting and fire protection, emergency medical assistance, so most of them are ETTs, and crime prevention and basic law enforcement. They do the misdemeanor investigations, and then assist as required with state trooper investigations. I have a quick little video here that we share with people from the VPSO's perspective of some of the things they do. I'm not sure, I'm going to take my headset off and put it next to my speaker, so hopefully you can hear this. It's about a minute long.
What a VPSO likes to do is anything that is asked of them, they try to be able to do it.
Animal control.
Dare officers.
I've been in the position where we've almost been counselors.
I've helped elders haul firewood.
We have VPSOs that are coaches, and
they go to the school.
Even just going in during story time and reading a book to the kids.
They do public awareness on gun safety.
Shoveled snow.
A lot of VPSOs get into suicide prevention teams.
Shoveling the porches of elders, I did a lot of that.
He'll give elders rides home.
Sometimes a village doesn't have a health aide, so the VPSO is also serving as a health aide until that can get filled, and sometimes who knows how long that can be.
He'll go to the school and talk with them about snow machining, for instance. You need to wear helmets.
And we help with animal vaccinations.
You know, working with, you know, youth groups.
They can do all kinds of different things.
VPSOs are also becoming a huge part of emergency response planning to natural disasters.
And when there's like a passing in the village, somebody, you know, passes on, I help, you dig the grave.
Typically, if you're, you know, a city cop, you're called to call, and that's about all you have time to do. And so VPSOs are reaching out and serving people in other capacities.
It's wherever I could pitch in and show them that, you know, that we're there to truly help.
So our VPSOs do a lot of things in our region, and so it gives us an opportunity when we actually look at recruiting. We have individuals that don't just want to be a cop. They want to be all three of those things or all four of those activities, and so it does give us an advantage when we start looking at applicants, but we are finding we have difficulty looking within our villages. So why did we go with VPSOs? So Alaska's a 280 state, PL 280 state, which means the state of Alaska is responsible for providing public safety and law enforcement to our villages, and cost-wise, the state just couldn't afford, I mean, fly a trooper out to every village every time there's an incident. It's too expensive. And so the idea was this Vpso program. We have 229 federally recognized tribes in Alaska, and we're working through our relationship with those tribes has changed in the last couple of years, where the state has finally realized that we can't continue to say we're the state and that's just too bad, but we're recognizing that those partnerships are important. Some of the difficulties we deal with recruiting is the lifestyle and the cultures of the villages. They are very unique. So here's a picture of Hooper Bay Village out on the west coast of Alaska, right on the ocean. That's the ocean that you see back there in the background. If you look at the roadways, you'll see the lines that are next to the roadways. That is the septic and water systems, because we can't run everything underwater. So Hooper Bay is unique in that they actually have water delivery to housing. We still have villages where we have honey buckets, where you use a bucket in the house and you put it in a garbage bag, and then it gets hauled away once or twice a week. And there are individuals that are from outside the region that find that appalling, and they'll never live in a village. And so the infrastructure and the circumstances around living in some of our villages, if you're not from the village, can be very difficult. But we also have difficulty recruiting from inside the villages, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the way the Vpso program works is we partner with the communities, nonprofits, the native nonprofits that were established as part of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, and a way for us to provide this service is through them. So Vpsos are actually employees of a native nonprofit, and we provide the funding through the state legislature, through my office, through grants to the nonprofits to operate and hire and employ the Vpsos. And then the state troopers provide oversight and guidance through law enforcement and training of the Vpsos. So while they're not directly our employees, we work directly with them in their capacity, and they receive their authority through the state, but they are employees of the nonprofits. So we have 9 nonprofits in one borough that work with us, and here's just a quick map of each area. We talk about Tanana Chiefs. When I talk with the coordinator up for Tanana Chiefs TCC, she always likes to point out that her geographic area and the villages that she covers are actually bigger than most states down in the lower 48. So finding a Vpso, one of the things we find is we try to look within the communities first. That's our goal, is to try to find people who live in the community, that are from the community, that have housing and have an attachment to that community. Right now, currently, our Vpso structure, we have about 50% of our Vpsos actually are Native Alaskan that come from their communities. The other 50% come from outside of their region. Either they're Native Alaskan and they are working in a different village, or they're not Native Alaskan, they're from the lower 48 or other areas. And we're taking everybody that we can take at this point in time. The next step is to look outside the community. So we look at other neighboring villages. Or there are Vpsos that will work, be willing to relocate with their family to a village that's nearby to alleviate some of the struggles they have of arresting their family members or working around their family so much in these small communities. It's 300-400 people. Sometimes that can be difficult. The next thing is we try to find somebody that understands the lifestyles and cultures and are willing to live that kind of a lifestyle. It's a subsistence-based lifestyle, living in the community, living in the village, working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our Vpsos don't get to go home and turn off. Troopers get to do that. They get to go home. They live in hub communities. They go home, park their car. On their weekends are theirs. Vpsos don't get that. People knock on their doors all the time. Each nonprofit in the past has been responsible for recruiting independently. So they use newspaper articles, radio, they go out and visit the villages, they do recruitment events, and they post flyers and some of those traditional type activities. But lately we found that that's not working. We're not getting the quality of candidates or the number of candidates that we need. So one of the new things that we're actually doing with the state is we've partnered with the Department of Public Safety recruiting unit, and now what they're doing is, because we're only hiring 1 or 2 troopers per academy to fill vacancies for people that are retiring, we are actually sending out letters to our 2,000 or 3,000 applicants that want to be state troopers and giving them the opportunity to be a Vpso as a foot in the door to becoming law enforcement in the state of Alaska. Our first stab at that just happened this last couple of weeks, and we're already getting phone calls of people that are interested in coming up and being trained, working as a Vpso for a minimum of 2 years as a commitment, and then they can look to be employed as a state trooper or a state trooper or a municipal law enforcement officer in the state of Alaska, because the training we send our Vpsos to qualifies them to receive their certification. Here's a picture of out in St. Lawrence Island, out in the village of Savunga. That's a VPSO housing unit that was provided by the village for a VPSO. The fuel tank there, they go through about one fuel tank every 2 months, and it costs about $3,000 to fill that fuel tank. So sometimes the villages subsidize the housing costs and the fuel costs. The first step in our hiring process is they have to go through the qualification form to make sure that they are qualified to be a VPSO. So a quick rundown there, just basically 21 years of age, high school diploma. There's some requirements about, physical. We currently now, for the first time ever, it's not in statute yet, but we require VPSOs to pass a physical fitness test. Includes push-ups, sit-ups, and a 1.5 mile run, which is very similar to the trooper PT test that we take. We cannot hire anybody who's had a felony conviction. We can hire them if they've had misdemeanor convictions that are more than 5 years. We're actually going to end up changing this statute this next year. We are allowed to hire VPSOs because in the past they haven't been armed, and we could hire VPSOs that have domestic violence convictions if it's been more than 10 years since the conviction. One of the difficulties we just found is by doing that, we have a VPSO that went to a suicide and took possession of a firearm that was used in the suicide and took it back to his office and locked it up. And the question that came out was, well, he's got a domestic violence conviction, so has he just committed a federal offense? And the answer is yes. And so we're trying to work through that process to see how we can alleviate that for our current VPSOs that this may apply to. And then we probably will have to make it a disqualifier if you have a DV conviction, because we don't want to put employees at risk of being charged for a crime for doing their jobs. So those are the basic requirements. So how do they apply? This is where it gets interesting, because they're not a DPS employee, but we have to run the background checks. So the first thing they do is they contact the hiring nonprofit or the borough. From there, we make sure that they meet the physical fitness requirements and the minimum qualifications. And then our department, my support troopers, conduct the background check. Right now, we're typically anywhere from a week to 2 weeks to get those turned around. In the past, it was anywhere from 2 months to 5 months. But by having the support trooper actually working for me in my office, we have found that it decreases the amount of time it takes for the background checks to be completed. So once that's done and we've started that process, then the VPSO and the hiring nonprofit have a meeting with the local village. And either the tribal council or the village council will get together, and they will conduct an interview with the candidate to see if they are willing to have that VPSO work in their community. So it adds an extra layer of interviews and process for hiring. Once the village has decided they want that VPSO to work for them and work with them in their community, the village then decides what resources they can provide. So can they provide housing or a stipend, or can they assist with housing costs? Office is required by statute, and then some basic office equipment. Once that's all been decided, the tribe enters into the hiring nonprofit enters into an MOA with the community, which it stipulates both parties' responsibilities, and then we have a master contract with each nonprofit that states what our responsibilities and their responsibilities for operating the program are. Once they complete that, they go to the Alaska Law Enforcement Training Academy, which is the same academy we send troopers to. That was a change that I made 1.5 years ago when we hired them. Before it was a 10-week academy, now it's a 15-week academy to make sure that they're a lot more qualified. They also attend fire training, and as well as CPR, first aid. We're working on getting ETT, and they work as a probation officer in their villages. Here's one last thing. These are one of the challenges we face, and I don't know if this is similar with some of the communities that you serve and the tribes that you serve in Indian country, but one of my good friends, Jacob Tabifluk, who just left the program last week, talks about some of the difficulties that they face here in Alaska as VPSOs.
You need a lot of support. I arrested my brother-in-law, and sometimes you just get disowned by people that you love the most. You need a lot of support. I arrested my brother-in-law, And sometimes you just get disowned by people that you love the most.
So Jacob was one of our candidates to be armed for the first time in the history of the program. Starting last year, we arm our VPSOs, and they can become armed if the village and their employer wants them to be armed. And Jacob chose not to be armed because he works in a community of 517, and he's related to most of them. And he, while he felt that he could use force with a firearm, he recognized that the aftermath and what would happen if he ever had to with a family member would be devastating to himself and the community. So it's one of the difficulties. So that's kind of an overview of the program. We experienced, I think, the same kind of things that Director Cruzan expressed about hiring from inside the communities. We're trying to build partnerships around the country and within the state with other agencies. With a downturn of employment, we're looking at veterans who are leaving military service as opportunities for us to employ VPSOs, but some people just don't have while they would be a cop in Anchorage or Fairbanks, asking them to move to a community like White Mountain, which is where Vpso Program is standing in that picture, is a difficult stretch for some of them because of the conveniences. There's no hospital, there's only a clinic, and so you're looking at $500-600 plane ticket just to get to the nearest hospital for any kind of treatment. So some of the things we've done, like I said, we've built our relationships with the nonprofits. We are all recruiting now as opposed to just them. We have troopers actively recruiting, and we're looking for opportunities to increase the way that we reach out to hire VPSOs. So with that, I'll turn it back over, and we can answer questions at the end or now, or however you want to handle that.
Thank you, Captain Merrill. Now I'll turn it over to Chief Rogers. And we'll do questions at the end after everyone presents.
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Rogers. I'm the police chief for the Nez Perce Tribal Police. Prior to that, I was doing community police training for the Western Community Policing Institute and for Fox Valley Technical College. One of the programs we came up with at the Western Community Policing Institute originated from a problem I was having as a tribal police chief in Washington State, where I was in a remote location called Nia Bay, Washington. I was chief of the department, and the most challenging thing we were trying to do was to hire. Again, very remote. Nobody wanted to move out there, and it was difficult to find tribal members who were interested in careers in law enforcement. So even then, we were thinking we have to reach back to our younger people to get them interested in careers in law enforcement. While working with the Western Community Policing Institute, we were doing a training, and some of the common concerns that came out of the 12 or 13 tribal communities that were in that training reflected that. They were concerned that a lot of the officers that worked in their communities were not from their tribe. They didn't understand the language or the protocols or the customs or the ceremonies, and they felt like they were being policed by an outside an agency, and they kind of wanted a police that was more reflective of their community and their culture. And so the idea of developing a Citizens Police Academy for youth and for Native youth came about. And while doing a speaking engagement in California, the sheriff of San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department heard me talk about this idea, and he basically offered me his police academy to do this. So on the next slide, we formed what we called the National Indian Youth Police Academy, and in partnership with the COPS office and Western Community Policing Institute and several tribes, we held our first academy in San Bernardino. On the next slide, we held 3 there. We held an academy there in 01, 02, 07, and that was, again, partnered with the COPS office and the Western Community Policing Center in 07. That was Fox Valley. In the next slide, we moved the academy to Seattle, and we held 2 academies at the Criminal Justice Training Commission Academy in Burien, Washington. And then on the next slide, we held 2 academies in Wisconsin at Fox Valley Technical College. In the next slide, you'll see that we have, over the 7 years that we ran the program, we've had over 430 Native American youth from 39 states, 2 Canadian provinces, and 1 Mexican province come to the program. And of course, the concept of this was to introduce young Native Americans into the career field of law enforcement. We had people that we could recruit, but they had domestic violence convictions, or they had a history that wasn't going to allow us to hire them as police officers. So we thought that if we could introduce the career to young people from the ages, at that time it was 13 through 17, then we moved it up to 14, and just kind of show them what the career fields were, all of them, and what it takes to become a police officer, what it takes to serve the community, that we might develop some young recruits out of this. The program quickly became more than just a recruiting tool. It became also a youth survival program. As we heard about the lives of many of our students, we found that we were working with them to develop survival skills for their teen years. They were all dealing with issues like sexual assault, child abuse, domestic violence, drugs and alcohol in the homes, and so a lot of our students were being directly impacted by the problems that many communities face. So we became a lot more than just a recruiting program. We became a survival kind of a program. One of the highlights of the efforts that we had is that the program got duplicated by many agencies. I mean, when we first started doing this, I had only heard of a few of these youth programs out there. We ended up being advisors to the Australian National Police, who heard about our program. They came up here and met with us and duplicated our program in Australia for the Aboriginal community in New Zealand and Australia. So that was kind of a nice compliment for the work that we were doing. On the next slide, you'll see some of the visuals of the activities that we had the students go through. It's a very, very hands-on program. All of the police academy facilities where we hold this really opened up their doors for us. All the kids challenge the physical test of whatever jurisdiction we're in. They get to witness and meet and see demonstrations by SWAT teams, bomb squads, K-9 units. San Bernardino County has the largest law enforcement air fleet in the nation. Some of our youth were selected by their peers to go fly patrols in the helicopters. The next slide, you'll see some other activities, such as the driving simulators. Again, some more SWAT stuff. We did a lot of PT. Their days were very busy. They're up at 6 a.m. and their lights out at 10. And so we kept we had 60 students. We would have 30 boys and 30 girls, and they're divided into squads. And as you can see by the colors of their shirts, they're green squad, blue squad, gray squad. And so they do everything as a squad. So a lot of our effort is team building and teaching the youth to be able to depend and rely on each other as they problem solve. In the next slide, you'll see just some more visuals of activities, the getting to ride in at the EVOC Center. We tried to use marching as a discipline. They took it up as a competition, and we ultimately ended up having the tradition of marching competitions at graduation day. So they got to experience everything. They got to hear from law enforcement experts in all areas, homicide and gang units and drug units. They get a pretty wide exposure over a 2-week period. One of the things that we did is the next slide, you'll see that we brought in a lot of various speakers that were not law enforcement oriented. These are tribal people who have survived things. For example, the gentleman on the left is a survival of a suicide attempt, which in Indian country, our teenagers commit suicide at 4 times the national average. He speaks on not making that decision to do that. He survived that himself, and the visual damage is there. On the right is a Native female who was in the adoption programs and was adopted away from her tribal families and went through several homes that were abusive to her, and so she developed a healing program which she presents to the youth. In the next slide, you'll see the gentleman who does a healing program for us. The healing program is the first Monday of the academy. Everybody has to attend, all students, all staff, and what this healer does is basically gets the youth to tell us about their lives. And in this time we find out about the kinds of lives that the youth are living, and then our counselors are able to identify who we need to spend time with and work with. From that program alone, we have uncovered sex abuse and child abuse, which we reported, and then we also uncovered a homicide. The young man who had been holding a secret for a long time came out in this event. And then one of the bigger things I think that happened out of that was the young man who survived the Red Lake school shooting. He became a survivor as a result of coming to our program, and at a national conference in a plenary session said that if it hadn't been for our Youth Academy program, he would have committed suicide by then. So we do include a lot of cultural components. We have cultural counselors on site. We do have ceremonies that we go through. You see the drum in this particular picture. The wood for that drum was actually donated by Native American prisoners from a state prison to our program. And then our youth and our counselors made the drum. It went through a blessing ceremony, so it is a sacred item. And we have cultural instructors who come in and work with the youth on learning a lot of different cultural components. In the next slide, you'll see the recognition. We spend a lot of time recognizing a lot of these youth. Many of them have never received a recognition or an acknowledgement. And while we don't just give things away, they do earn everything that they walk away from, but the self-esteem that is built during this time is really an amazing thing to watch. A lot of the youth have never left their communities before, so it's their first time flying. It's their first time being out in an area that's very strange to them. So if they don't win an individual award, the squads definitely win awards, and that is very significant. That top right picture is the young man who survived the Red Lake shooting, and what he's doing is he's exchanging gifts with a deputy sheriff from San Bernardino County who also survived being shot. He was on a domestic violence call and was shot 7 times. Our young man was shot at the Red Lake School. They're both shooting survivors, and they formed a bond that was really unique when you think about a young reservation man forming a bond with a urban agency officer like that. But that's the strength of this particular program, is developing those relationships and building the trust, and that improves a lot of everybody, both law enforcement and the youth's viewpoints and perceptions of each other. In the next slide, the graduation component. The graduation actually has become a pretty significant event. The very first one we had, we didn't think anybody would show up, but we had people drive to California all the way from North Dakota and Minnesota to go watch their kids graduate, and that became a really significant step. And one of the things that we really emphasize by the community policing model is developing those relationships between police and youth, and having those relationships being formed in terms of trust and kind of in a way a peer relationship. I had a young man who attended this academy. He was a gang member, and we don't restrict who attends our programs. But the young gang member actually wrote me a handwritten letter after he got home, and he said that one of the things, he'll never be a policeman, but one of the benefits of that academy is he is going to stay away from drugs, stay away from alcohol, he's going to stay away from the gang, because we did something at the academy that no adult has ever done with him, and that is we talked with him, not to him or not at him, but we talked with him and we listened. And that was a really significant letter for us. But many of the youth that attended this program when they were 14 are now in their 20s, and we have created some police officers out of this. So our original mission of trying to create a police officer did in fact take place. And it is a long-term process. I mean, that's how we see this. Sometimes folks want a very quick fix. This is a long-term fix, and it's difficult to fund. These are not inexpensive at all. They're pretty expensive to operate. The next slide just shows the acknowledgement of this kind of a program. Now they are all over the United States. There are Youth Academy programs everywhere. And back when we started in 2001, we didn't hear or see of many of those things. So I think the concept spread. I would like to hope that maybe we had something to do with that. We did get a lot of media coverage on our academies, and the next slide is the flag of our academy. That was created by a Oglala holy woman and a Fort Hall tribal member. A lot of significance to our flag. We really emphasize a lot of the words that are in that flag: the respect, the tradition, the commitment, and the honor, with our youth. And we have gotten lots of compliments from the parents and the relatives of the youth that come to our program. And people say, well, how do you know it's successful? And for me, in Indian country, the way you gauge some success is how many complaints did you get. And we've never had a complaint from any family members about this program other than you didn't pick our son or you didn't pick our daughter. Those are really the only complaints we've ever had from the families and the participants of that program. And one of the things the program did is it fed the Police Explorers program. We had youth leave our program, go back to their communities, and they wanted to learn more. They wanted to keep involved in the law enforcement area. And so police exploring programs, police exploring chapters were created in many reservations where the youth went back. And we are actually working on forming a formal relationship with them to hopefully continue this program. We have some funding for it this year, and we're hoping to get it going again this year back with San Bernardino County. In the next slide, at the local level, I left doing national trainings, and I come back to my home reservation and take the police department here. And one of the first things I get hammered with, as Director Cruzon points out, is, you know, there's a lot of emphasis to hire tribal members on the police department, but one of the resolutions our tribal council passed is that you have to attain an SLEC, the Special Law Enforcement Commission. You have to complete adjudication to become a police officer here, and that eliminates a lot of people. And we have a large area. We have 1,200 square miles, and we only have a tribal population of about a little less than 3,000 people, so the hiring pool is not very large. I do have on my department 5 members of the tribe in the department, including myself. I have 3 descendants, and then I have 4 members of other tribes on the department, and then 10 non-tribal officers. So one of the things we felt we could do to try to develop future officers for the tribal police department was to get an exploring program going. And so in the next slide, you'll just see some activities of some of our explorers. We started a post here at the main town on the reservation, Lapwai, and that ended up with 15 active explorers. And then our other tribal community, which is 67 miles away, they were asking for a similar program. And so we created an Explore post up there. In our very first meeting, we had 12 youth get involved in the program. So we have 2 exploring posts located on the reservation. And the next slide, again, just some activities, but one of the projects that they have become very well known for is participating. Their community service project is the food bank. And so every week when the food bank comes out to distribute food, our explorers are out there unloading the trucks and making the stacks and distributing the food and cleaning up afterwards, and they've gotten a lot of recognition for that community service effort. The school allows them to leave their classes so they can come out and participate in that. Officer Stegner, who's in that photograph, is our school resource officer. He is our adult advisor for both the exploring posts, dedicates a massive amount of personal time to that project. The next picture, again, just a few photographs of some of the activities. They do engage in a lot of the police training. They're going to participate in some competitions regionally, and hopefully if they make it to the national level, they provide security at school events or community events, not security in the sense that they're going to interact with offenders, but just visual, and they can get information to the police officers that are on site. Next photograph just shows some of the, the practice training that they do with the police advisors. And it's been a really successful program, and they've gotten a lot of accolades for what they've accomplished. So the last slide just shows our students. This particular picture just appeared in the newspaper yesterday, and they've really made a great name for themselves. It's very brave of them to put those uniforms on in a community where sometimes policing isn't that popular. but they do so proudly, and they're very proud of the work that they do. The community acknowledges that, and I do believe we are creating future police officers with this program. And that's about it for me. I'll turn it back over to the host.
Thank you, Chief Roberts. Now I'll turn it over to Matt.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're running a little low on time, so I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about some of the resources that the COPS office has, particularly around recruitment and hiring publications, our grant programs for hiring, and our tribal resources that aren't necessarily related to recruitment and hiring, but just in general for tribal agencies that they might be able to utilize. So in the recruitment and hiring publication area, the COPS office, we've been around for 20 years plus now, and we've developed many publications, several around recruitment and hiring. Pictured here is first our CD-ROM, which is Recruitment, Hiring, and Retention Resources for Law Enforcement. This is a compendium of not only COPS office resources, but also other public and private resources around the recruitment and retention issue. And then we also have a law enforcement recruitment toolkit. This was actually developed by IACP, and it includes reports around recruitment. It actually contains 4 separate reports that highlight a few of the topics and issues in recruiting and retention in general. 2 other recruitment and hiring related publications we have is the Police Recruitment and Retention for the New Millennium. This was a RAND produced publication that talks about recruitment issues and lessons learned in a broad sense from the field. And then finally, our Innovations in Police Recruitment and Hiring in the Spirit of Service. This is a publication that highlights examples from 5 law enforcement agencies that served as demonstration sites for hiring in the spirit of service. This was a project, it's a little bit dated now, but about a decade or so ago, we began this project to try and change the sort of focus of the field from hiring in the spirit of adventure to hiring in the spirit of service. And that sort of continues today with the guardian mentality that we're looking at with officers. In the grant program area for hiring, you may be familiar with some of our grant programs. The 2 related to hiring for tribal officers, the Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation, which has the Tribal Resources Grant Program in it, is COPS Office's tribal specific grant program. That opened in November of last year, and it closes in a little over a month on February 23rd. And that covers the full cost of officer salary and benefits for 3 years, and it does have the 1-year retention period after the 3 years. We have a few upcoming webinars on CTAS in general and the specific purpose areas that they're called, the different offices that participate in CTAS from the Department of Justice. We have a few upcoming webinars that you can find on our website that I'll reference later in the presentation. The other grant program that the COPS office has is our COPS hiring program. This is the program that's open to all law enforcement, not just tribal agencies, but all 18,000 or so law enforcement agencies in the U.S. This one is a little more restrictive in that it only covers 75% of officer salary and benefits up to $125,000 for the 3 years. It doesn't allow for indirect costs like the Tribal Resources Grant Program. It does have the 1-year retention requirement. That's a statutory mandate essentially for all of our hiring programs. That program, which is open to tribes, like I mentioned, is likely going to open later in spring of this year. It's typically when we release all of our solicitations, so keep an eye out for that on our website as well. Besides our grant programs, I also want to mention some of our training and technical assistance opportunities. We provide tribal training and technical assistance around many different fields in the public safety, including community policing, prescription drugs, gangs, youth safety, etc. You can find details about our training and technical assistance that we provide on our website link there. And we also have, we participate in the Department of Justice's broader tribal training and technical assistance page, which is justice.gov/tribal. and you can see the training and technical assistance opportunities across the entire Department of Justice there. This slide is just a few listings of our training and technical assistance providers that we work with. Many of you may have heard of them. The Western Community Policing Institute, Dave mentioned them, and Fox Valley as well. The Upper Midwest Community Policing Institute, Lamar Associates, the National Alliance for Drug Endangered Children, and Strategic Applications International. Again, these are just the providers that we work with that provide the various types of training that I mentioned across really a broad range of topics. In the tribal resources area, I just want to mention a few publications that we have. Some of these are pretty recent, so you may not be aware of all of them. First is another CD-ROM that we have. This is similar to the recruitment and retention CD-ROM that I mentioned, in that it's a compendium of resources, not just from the COPS office, but from others as well, that tribal law enforcement might find useful. The second publication pictured there is a BOLO. It's our cute little publication, Be on the Lookout for, around upcoming projects and publications that we're about to release. So they're sort of short little pieces around these upcoming larger publications that we have. This one is called Strategic Efforts to Address Methamphetamine in Indian Country, and it describes some of the tribal training and technical assistance efforts we made to address methamphetamines. It includes an example of the White Earth tribe that focused on methamphetamines through grants and training and technical assistance there. And two of our most recent ones are two publications produced by Fox Valley for us. They are successful tribal community policing initiatives. This publication highlights about 15 tribes' community policing efforts based on some tribal training and technical assistance they did. It's a great publication that really provides concrete examples that you might be able to utilize in your tribes. And the second one on there is Public Safety Partnerships in Indian Country. This describes partnership efforts in Mendocino County, California, and the Round Valley tribes, a project that the COPS office funded to put resident deputies from Mendocino County to work in close consultation with the Round Valley tribes. And that publication is also available on our website. You can actually order all the publications we have from our website. This is a slide here. You can see I've highlighted the Resource Center, which if you go to our website, cops.usdoj.gov, you can click on the Resource Center, and all of those publications are available either for download, if you prefer to look at them electronically, order hard copies if they're available in hard copy. Most of the ones I mentioned, I think, are still available in hard copy, and you can order many of those as you like. If you order a sort of a bulk order that you'd like to do for like a training activity or something for your officers, we can accommodate those. They just get vetted through myself, and I'll approve those. Finally, my contact information. I'm happy to address any questions that you might have or from the COPS office perspective. And again, thanks for IACP for hosting this webinar and providing an opportunity for us all to talk to you about hiring in the spirit of service and tribal tradition.
All right, thank you. This is Jennifer Stiles. I'm the project manager of IACP's Tribal Community Policing Project, and I wanted to share just a few final resources. We only have a few minutes left. While I'm sharing this, if you have any questions, please put those into the question box. I see we've had one come in so far, but if there's anything else, please feel free to put those forward. I wanted to share just a few things from IACP. Our main hiring and recruitment opportunity is Discover Policing. This is a website that was funded with money from the COPS office and also from BJA, and it's a really dynamic career center resource that police departments can use to post jobs. Anything entry level is free to post, and then people who are looking for jobs can go on and they can search by state, by agency type. It's a very dynamic resource, and definitely something that we encourage you to take a look at. We also have a couple of our administrative resources that cover recruitment and retention. Police Chief's Desk Reference is one of our most popular resources, and we've just put out a new update to that in October of 2015, so that's available on our website at the link on the screen here. And finally, wanted to point out our Police Chief magazine. We regularly focus on recruitment and retention because the issues we've talked about today and we hear from regularly these are not just tribal policing issues. Every jurisdiction in America is having issues with recruitment, getting the right people for the job. So we regularly looking at best practices, and you can access past issues and current issues of Police Chief magazine on the website there. And we also have complimentary subscriptions. So my contact information is on the next screen. If you're interested in that, we'd be happy to connect you with that resource. And then we finally have a couple more webinars coming up in our tribal policing series. We have one next week on information sharing and one the following week on improving cultural awareness. So you can register for those on the link on your screen there. And we will be putting out a publication, a resource guide later this year that will also be available on this website, and we'll certainly let all our participants know when that's available. So going to be looking at some of these topics we're talking about in the webinars and really kind of a ground up building a community policing program in tribal police departments. So my contact information is here on that screen. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask those anytime. And with that, we're going to take some questions. We've had one come in asking a question for Darren, asking if it's possible to set up an eligibility list of pre-qualified candidates that can be drawn upon when a specific vacancy occurs.
So I think that's a great idea. And so the answer is no, there's not one currently. The answer is yes. I think that's something that we're looking at. The truth of the matter is we've been filling positions as we get them. So like a chief of police at a BI location, say Standing Rock, is actively recruiting to fill current vacancies, and so once those are filled, the urgency to get those. But it's a great idea and something that we will definitely. I'll explore that. I don't know why that would be not doable. It's a great idea.
That's great, thank you. Looks like that's our last question, but as we're kind of wrapping up here, I had one question to I think we've talked a lot about the challenges that we all face, and I'm curious if any of our presenters have thoughts on, what are some of the unique things, some of the positive aspects? How can we better sell tribal policing? If you had some kind of closing thoughts on, how do we sell this as a really good opportunity? Maybe in the room, or Captain Merrill or Chief Rogers, if you have any thoughts.
Jennifer, I didn't quite hear the question.
Wondering, how can we better sell tribal policing? We talk a lot about the challenges. Certainly it's difficult in remote communities. It's difficult, working in small communities. But what are some of those opportunities, those little nuggets that we can put forward to better, get the right people for the job?
Well, at least with my agency, what we've really tried to do is truly treat this as a profession as opposed to a job, and to make the job or the profession itself attractive to candidates in terms of having pay that's, we're actually paying a little more than our surrounding counties are. We don't have the retirement program that the surrounding counties do, but we do have a retirement account, which helps. The biggest distraction I have is that we are not recognized by the state. And so that really hinders recruitment, because we send everybody either, to either the Indian Police Academy, but the majority of our officers go to the State Academy, because one of the things we're trying to accomplish is getting state recognition. But it's really difficult for a police officer to go through that academy and come out with just a certificate of attendance and not a police certification. And if they come to work for the tribe, if they don't have other employment with another state agency within 3 or 4 months, they will lose that effort that they put into it. So that's my biggest effort right now, is just getting the state to recognize tribal police. That would improve our recruiting tremendously.
I would second that, Chief Rogers. This is Darren. I think that's exactly right. We need our state partners to recognize tribal law enforcement professionals as just that. And there are a number of them that have done it. I will tell you this, and I'm not just saying this because Captain Merrill's on the phone, and I like him very much, but this is the honest truth. There aren't many states that do it quite like Alaska. They are definitely leading from the front when it comes to working in tribal villages, but what we would call Indian country down here in the lower 48, as you say. But they do a great job and I will tell you something else. I've been in Indian country a long time as a tribal police officer, and then in the VI for a number of years. And I will tell you, I think the professionalism in Indian country has come light years from what it used to be, 20 years ago. And I think it's because of the professionalism of the departments, and just taking the profession more seriously and being better and smarter when we hire. And so I would agree with that on the states, but I will tell you, I think continuing to do what we're doing about professionalizing our organization, I think that will go a long way to help us recruit more qualified people.
That's great. And I have building on that, what Darren's comments and Chief Rogers' comments, I certainly agree with the professionalism in the field. We have here at the IACP an Indian Country Law Enforcement section that has been active for about 20 years now, and it's a great opportunity for tribal police chiefs to connect, and it's something that we're regularly doing trainings twice a year at our mid-year meeting and at our annual conference. And I would be happy to share information about that with anyone who's on the line if you can contact me at the information there. But I certainly think that we have come a long way. Okay, Captain Merrill, I think you had a comment as well.
Sure. So I think I'll parrot what the director said and what Chief has said. One of the things that we're finding is the partnerships are a huge benefit to our recruitment and to changing the way that we view law enforcement for Indian country and Alaska Native villages. Educating our partners and educating people in the communities about what are for us specifically, what our VPSOs do, the sacrifices that they make, those little short video clips that I shared earlier about our VPSOs talking about what they do, opens a lot of eyes about what our VPSOs do. And Chief made a really good point. One of the things that we've done in the program in the last year and a half is to up the professionalism of our the way that people view our VPSOs. I mean, I've worked along VPSOs for 13 years out in the field as a trooper working with them. And now, as a program commander, what I'm recognizing is that people don't realize what our VPSOs do and what our tribal officers, give to their communities. So a couple of things that we've done in the partnerships, we bring our VPSOs in. We have, I'm guessing in the lower 48, you have powwows and large gatherings, and ours is AFN. It's Alaska Federation of Native meeting that happens every year in October, and it happens in Fairbanks or in Anchorage, because those are the two large communities where those events occur. And what we've done is we've started bringing in our VPSOs, and they work alongside Anchorage police officers for 3 shifts a day. They work along Fairbanks police officers, and what we found is the community members are starting to recognize, and other law enforcement agencies are changing the way they view our VPSOs. And they're able to diffuse situations that in the past, a tribal member comes in from the community, is intoxicated. In the past, APD would walk down, throw cuffs on them, throw them in the back of the car, pepper spray them, fight with them, drag them off to the holding cell to sleep it off. And now a VPSO standing there that the community member recognizes diffuses that situation, and they're able to speak with them in their language. They're able to interact with them because they know VPSOs, and the police department has found that to be substantially beneficial to their enforcement efforts during those events. So those partnerships are huge. And on the chief side, I think one of the huge things that we have found is that we are sending our VPSOs to the same academy we send, which has never happened until last year, to the same training we send our troopers and our municipal officers. And it was a huge thing for me when I first started this endeavor. I was told it wouldn't work. Commanders and law enforcement officers and chiefs told me, this is crazy, it'll never happen, VPSOs will never pass the academy. We've sent, I think, 7 and 6, so we've sent 13, 14 VPSOs to the academy. All of them have graduated with full certificates saying they've graduated the academy. We've worked with our Alaska Police Standards Council. They allow a 3-year window after completion of the academy to become fully certified. They can't become fully certified working as a VPSO, but if they give us 2 years as a VPSO, they can then become certified if they work with another agency. We're looking at possibly changing that. We're still working towards that, but it was a huge thing for me this last academy when one of our VPSOs was elected by his peers, which included Alaska Wildlife Troopers, Alaska State Troopers, Coast Guard, municipal agencies from Juneau and Sitka and other agencies. They elected our VPSO as the class leader. And so it's a huge thing I think we're seeing with that standard. And so, Chief, any requests or help that I can help with you to move that along, be happy to. And I think this is a great opportunity for all of us to start building these partnerships.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I realize we're a few minutes over, so I thank all of our participants for hanging on with us, and certainly thank all of our presenters for joining us today. I think it's been really informative. I think we've covered a lot of different types of agencies and some kind of universal challenges as well. So with that, we're going to close up. As we close the session, you'll see a brief 3-question survey pop up just asking about your experience. If you have a moment to take that, we appreciate your feedback as it really helps us plan our future trainings and webinars. So just going to close out and thank you all again for joining us.